Ron Johnson. He's chairman of the Homeland Security Committee and serves on the Foreign Relations Committee. Senator Johnson, thanks so much for being here, as always. So this Washington Post scoop has now been corroborated by multiple outlets. Flynn did discuss sanctions with the Russian ambassador, leaving the impression with the ambassador they would be revisited, these sanctions. Then he and the White House were not honest about this to the American people. What's your reaction?
Well, hello, Jake. I've always felt the best policy is to be truthful. I haven't been briefed on this. I probably will be. We'll follow this story. Beyond that, I really can't comment.
Will you request access to the transcripts of this conversation, should they exist?
I'm sure it'll be briefed. So we'll find out how this all unfolds. We'll find out what the information actually is. We'll find out what the truth is.
So there are 9 current and former government officials that told the Washington Post, and these are great reporters that broke this story, that this call happened. They were discussing sanctions, and they were leaving the impression, Flynn was leaving the impression that they would be revisited at a later date. If this is proven that he did this, do you think he should be disciplined in any way? Should he leave the White House?
Again, let's find out what the actual truth is. You know, from my standpoint, what I want to focus on is Russian behavior. We had a hearing in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee yesterday, and we had General Breedlove, and we also had a Democrat witness. You couldn't tell any difference between the two witnesses. Both want to make sure that we address Russia with strength, with resolve. We need to push back. For my questioning, I was talking about the facts on the ground in Ukraine, where Russia has basically invaded not only Crimea, but eastern Ukraine. They've pretty well set up shop there. Similar situation as they did in 2008 in terms of Georgia. So from the standpoint of Congress and Senate Foreign Relations Committee, we're going to be laying out these realities and make sure that the United States policy toward Russia is one of strength and resolve in pushing back and trying to prevent further aggression on the part of Vladimir Putin.
Do you think President Trump shares your point of view, shares that goal?
Well, that's one of the reasons we're holding the hearings, is to lay out these kind of realities, and I think it's pretty obvious that we need to address Russia, fully understanding who Vladimir Putin is. I mean, let's face it, we had another freedom fighter in Russia, probably poisoned. In my European subcommittee, we held hearings on the poisonings, the political assassinations, somewhere around 30 of them since Vladimir Putin took power. We've also held hearings on the pervasive Russian propaganda and disinformation campaigns around the world, but in particular in Eastern Europe. So no, I view Vladimir Putin as a real menace, and certainly take a look at their actions in Syria, the genocide that's been occurring over in Syria for years. Close to 500,000 Syrians have been slaughtered. So no, I address Vladimir Putin in Russia with a great deal of wariness.
Conservative blogger Ed Morrissey wrote at Hot Air, quote, "Had an incoming Democratic president done this to a Republican, it would have produced a lot of angry demands for someone's head, and arguably rightly so." Do you really think that you would have the same attitude had the Washington Post broken a story about Susan Rice doing this to George W. Bush?
I always make sure that I understand exactly what the facts are. I have not been briefed on this. I'm not disputing the reports, but let's face it, there's another side of the story, and they're denial. So again, I just don't know the truth, Jake. That's why I'm not commenting any further.
What did you make of it on Sunday when Bill O'Reilly talked to President Trump and asked him about Putin? And at one point, O'Reilly said he's a killer, and the president said there are a lot of killers. Do you think the United States is so innocent? What was your reaction to that, sir?
There is no moral equivalence. And again, we've been on this. From my standpoint, the facts of the situation, the reality, as I said, we held a hearing specifically to highlight the assassinations that have occurred in Russia on political enemies of Putin, and we laid that out. Boris Nemtsov was gunned down, I think, the day before we held that hearing. Totally unrelated, but a tragic coincidence from that standpoint.
Yeah, we've been.
And now we have Mr. Muammar Garza, who we believe is probably poisoned for the second time. Hopefully he will recover.
Yeah, we've been covering that all week. Shifting topics for 1 second, since you're the chairman of the Senate Homeland Security Committee, take a listen to what James Clapper, the former director of national intelligence under President Obama, told my colleague Jim Sciutto about President Trump's travel ban.
Does the terror threat necessitate the ban from these 7 countries?
Well, I don't believe we, the IC, were aware of any extraordinary threats that we weren't already dealing with.
Does a ban like this, in your view, does it damage U.S. image, but also counterterror partnership?
Yes.
Your reaction, sir? Do you think, first of all, are there threats that you know of now that the Homeland Security apparatus and people like the Director of National Intelligence didn't know of before President Trump took office from those 7 countries? And second of all, do you think the ban, were it to be re-implemented, makes us safer?
Well, first of all, nothing specific, but personally, I think it was a reasonable precaution. When you take a look at the failed states that have been really isolated in this, or the executive order was all targeting, these governments do not have access to the kind of information that we can access to make sure that we know who the identities of people are. Identities are sold very cheaply in these countries. So let's face it, I am concerned about the real growing, evolving, metastasizing risk that we face from Islamic terror as it relates to ISIS emanating from those types of countries. So, from my standpoint, I think it was a reasonable precaution. I think what will continue to happen is we will continue to review the vetting process. I think that's entirely appropriate. So, I've got a great deal of faith in General Kelly, now Secretary Kelly, as the Secretary of Homeland Security, to do a good job of trying to keep this nation safe.
Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, joining us today from the city of Milwaukee. Thanks so much for joining us as always, sir.